Welcome to International Marketing Week 3's overview. This week, our course text focuses on the political marketing environment variables. A quick reminder is for you to understand that of the 7 variables the course text in this course examines, none of them are within your control. But every marketing campaign needs to analyze them to see how these variables impact your marketing objectives, and you would use the lens of the 4 Ps, or the marketing mix in this respect. How are your product, price, place, and promotion impacted so that you can best reach your target market while considering the impact of all these variables? This week we will look at political systems. The key concepts from Chapter 3, Political Elements and Their Impact, are about understanding the nature of the different political systems that are prevalent throughout the world, a mental model or a tool that can help you understand how these systems may impact your marketing campaign would be for you to research the country you are focusing on, where they would fall on a political spectrum. There are many different political spectrum models, and be careful because some sources that are written for very specific purposes have an enormous amount of bias based off of whatever organization was creating that model. However, one mental construct to keep in mind, no matter what political system you're looking at, is to examine whether it's more individualistic or more collectivist. And those beliefs, those mix of ideas and the way government is designed to function within that culture will lead you to understanding, is this a government that is focused more on individual liberty or protecting people's individual freedoms, for instance, in an individualistic society, or is it more emphasizing the good of the whole, the good of the collective? The chapter also gives a very extensive and quick review of many trade policies, agreements, and organizations, and there is a lot of vocabulary to master within the chapter. And all of these, definitely, when you see them in your research, will have a political impact on your marketing efforts. We will go through them very briefly now. The 5 major political systems in operation throughout the world today are democracy, republics, monarchies or some form of oligarchy, communism, and dictatorships. Monarchies could also fall under the category of dictatorship as well. Starting from the bottom, a dictatorship is where one person runs the country. Whatever they say or whatever they want is what happens. There's no voting, there's no opposition. It is what the dictator says it is. Communism is where the government owns all means of production. They decide what is made, by whom, where, and how it's distributed. And in extreme forms of communism, the goal is, as the red lower left-hand image shows you, is to make sure everyone's needs are met and everyone in society is treated equally. Oligarchies and or monarchies is where a very few people run the government, and in a monarchy's case it usually is one ruler, which would be a dictatorship, but oftentimes that ruler is determined by family lines, and so you might consider that that family is really running government. Other forms of oligarchy are aristocracies or plutocracy, where the very wealthy or the elites of the country are the ones who control all aspects of government. A republic is a government. It's a representative form of government in which, though the people, the representatives, have all power over government, so it is a government that is subject to the will of the people. And a democracy is a further extreme example of having every individual in society contribute to determining what the government's function should be and what the government should, what its purpose should be and how it should operate. The United States is a democratic republic, so we have voting, a representative democracy, where we vote for our representatives to send them to our national government, which is structured like a republic. Our representatives will come from all of our 50 states and some of our territories, and they work together, or sometimes not, to make decisions about what our government does and what it should not do. Going back to the construct of individualistic or collectivist societies, democratic republics tend to be more individualistic, valuing individual liberty and individual expression over many times the collective good. And communism and some forms of dictatorship actually might be considered collectivist, in that the idea of government is to make sure everyone's needs are taken care of. You can also, though, have dictatorships which are extreme expressions of individualism, in which a small group of people take over all modes of government and appoint one person to exact the powers of government to achieve the ends of the small group at the expense of the collective. So this is all tricky. Every country is a mix of many of these things. One thing to note, though, is when we talk about capitalism versus socialism, those are economic systems, not political systems. Socialism, in particular, has political ramifications, but capitalism, again, would be on the end of more of an individualistic economic model, in which systems are made so that the survival of the fittest, the individual might be empowered to increase their profits in such the way that it might not be so great for the collective, whereas socialism is very concerned about economics such that extreme wealth might not be able to be accumulated if it's deemed by the government to have a negative impact on the common good. There are many international organizations and trade organizations in place. These are supranational entities. That means, in many cases, they create systems or structures that actually may override an individual country's desires or wishes, and they don't do it for just any purpose. The idea is to create balance, to create peace, to create stability. And some of the examples listed here you might be familiar with: NATO, the United Nations, the European Union, and the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization was created in the 1990s specifically to help settle and create policy around international trade norms to promote economic stability and to promote peace among the world's nations and how we do commerce. There is a natural tension with political consequences that always exists with all of these supranational organizations. These organizations can create structures in which the individual sovereignty of a nation is overridden or overruled at the expense of creating fairness across the member nations, or to create peace or prosperity, or to govern markets so that there isn't oversupply or a gouging of prices. The idea here is that political parties within each country have very different stances on the extent to which they are willing to cede their individual sovereignty to any of these supranational entities. So you have to be very aware of when there's political shifts within each country and understand what that party's stance is on the trade policies that extend from the supranational organizations in which that country might be a part of. They may also be part of a treaty, a multilateral treaty with even one other nation that could impact the product or the service you are trying to place within that society.